Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Around the nation right here, TYT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you on this Wednesday. It's hump day. It's half the week is over. Thank goodness. There's been a lot of news, so it already feels like it should be Friday, but unfortunately it's not. And look, you guys know the news has been moving faster, I think, than anybody can keep track of. But I'm going to try to choose some of the best stories, or I think some of the most important stories relevant to the day. So that's what I try to do here. Anyway, so what we have here on today's show, it's a little fun. Well, actually, it's not fun at all. There's like no fun stories in this breakdown. There's been so much going on. But something interesting when it comes to Trump regulations on asbestos. An interesting move by an asbestos company. I've got the details on that. We also have Trump and the ACA, or Trump versus the ACA, some new things. Another way to cripple the health law. We also have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. We'll be talking about her in the show today as well. And the reaction from Democrats inside the House. Interesting. We also have a couple making a really, really hard decision when it comes to healthcare. We've got judges, not Supreme Court judges, but actually local judges. It's very important. We've got an act that is sponsored by Republicans that would be devastating for free speech. We also have Joe Rogan. So that's somebody that I haven't talked about on the show today, but there's an interesting segment or video that's been floating around for a little while on Joe Rogan, or from Joe Rogan. And I want to talk about that because I think it is interesting, especially when it comes to starting conversations with people. So anyway, now before I head into that, first, I want to thank everybody for being here. Please hit the like button and also make sure to share out the stream for everybody. Then, also, if you haven't already, or if you want to, please subscribe. Wow, that came out terribly. But anyway, if you want to help out the show, you can use the super chat or consider becoming a patron to patreon.com/tytnation. That, of course, goes to help the show. All right. Anyway, so a lot of stuff. Let's do this. Okay. So Donald Trump has a deregulation agenda. Of course, he doesn't like regulations on things like the environment. No, a coal company should be able to dump coal ash in the river. That's fine. You know why? It's because it's good for business. We're going to get rid of these job-killing regulations. So we're going to allow these companies to basically do whatever the hell they want because, hey, it's good for jobs, good for the economy. It's also terrible for people. Now, one of the things that was recently deregulated by Scott Pruitt, before he, of course, resigned from the EPA, is asbestos. Now, there is a certain country that actually does a lot of work when it comes to asbestos, produces asbestos, and this apparently is a company in Russia. Now, they did something interesting. They have begun placing a seal with President Trump's face on their products. Now, The Guardian has reported on Wednesday that Urala's Best has adorned pallets of its product with Trump's face and the message, approved by Donald Trump, 45th President of the United States. Now, this is an interesting / kind of strange move. Well, here you have a company that does asbestos. And look, I guess it kind of makes sense because under President Trump, we have basically said, no, asbestos, not a problem. In fact, we're going to deregulate asbestos so that you can use it in a lot of different places. And now you have a company saying, thank you, Trump. Interesting. Now, the news outlet noted that the move came after the EPA elected not to prohibit the new asbestos product outright. Donald is on our side, Urala's Best announced in a Facebook post accompanied by the products, with Trump's face stamped atop them. The Post also thanks Trump for supporting former EPA Chief Scott Pruitt and adds that Trump called asbestos 100% safe after application. The problem is asbestos is classified by the government as a known carcinogen because there is evidence there, studies and evidence that suggests asbestos fibers can become lodged in the lungs and cause mesothelioma. It can also reportedly cause cancer of the lung, larynx, and ovary. Now that, of course, did not stop right-wingers like former EPA head Scott Pruitt from deregulating the industry and saying, no, it's completely safe. What are you talking about? Well, because there are companies out here that need to make money. You know, facts, science, studies, health, who cares? Oh, what's next? We're going to bring back lead paint? I mean, I guess apparently I shouldn't be giving them ideas. But look, this is another example of the Trump deregulation agenda. Now, the interesting twist here that I think, is just kind of fascinating to behold, is that there's a Russian firm that happens to be benefiting directly from these decisions and thanking Trump directly. We seem to be hearing that a lot. Different Russian politicians saying, yes, we own Trump. Trump has been great for us. Trump has been great to us. It's just kind of weird hearing all that stuff come out from another country. It's almost as if the things that Trump is doing, maybe not intentionally, maybe intentionally, just happen to benefit that certain country. Weird. Now, Ural Asbest is located in Asbest, a mining city in the Ural Mountains of Russia. And it's noted by The Guardian that previous reports have said the company has ties with Russian President Vladimir Putin, with whom Trump is set to meet in Finland this month. Now, look, I think to be fair, in Russia, every company has to have ties with Putin or else he'll put you out of business. He's essentially an autocrat in the area. And look, most of Russia is actually an oligarchy. So money rules. And of course, if you have ties to people who are in power, you're obviously going to get favored treatment in business. That's kind of what's happening here in the United States as well. Now, let me give you a quote here from Ken Cook, president of the Environmental Working Group, which is an environmentalist group that, of course, is very harshly criticizing this by saying Vladimir Putin and Russia's asbestos industry stand to prosper mightily as a result of the Trump administration's failure to ban asbestos in the United States, which, again, is incredibly harmful. But I think what's happening here is, look, Trump is helping out his buddies in business, and not only that, but helping out Putin. And at the same time, owning the libs in order to make asbestos great again. It's a threefer. And so Trump couldn't resist. It just tells you a lot about how this administration is going and who they actually serve. Okay. So, moving on. Let me go to a related story, actually. And this has to do with, again, regulation. Let me go here. Now, President Trump has recently signed an executive order giving agency heads more power over the selection of certain judges. This is according to an article in Politico. They write that these judges, typically promoted out of the federal civil service, end up making legal rulings that drive regulatory actions across the federal government. So, for example, if you have the head of an agency, for example, that does oil and gas or regulates oil and gas, and you say, hey, you know what? Under this executive order, I can now fire you and replace you with someone else. Well, what effect do you think that's going to have? The administration, which is friendly to oil and gas, will likely fire the judge and replace him with someone who's going to rule on the side of oil and gas. That, of course, would be absolutely disastrous. Now, right now, the federal government employs 2,000 administrative law judges, with the greatest number in the Social Security Administration. Oh, great. So if you want to attack Social Security, well, this is a perfect avenue to do so. Wonderful. Now, the new executive order, let me go back here. Those judges also adjudicate regulatory disputes within the HHS, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which again deals with oil and gas, the NLRB, that's the National Labor Relations Board, so labor law, and the SEC, which regulates banking, financial industries. So, oh boy, their rulings can be and often are challenged in federal court. And of course, these judges, if they're challenged on for example, a new banking regulation that makes it so that banks will be able to charge higher interest rates or do more predatory loans, and the judge is on the side of the banks, well, you can see what would happen. Now, the new executive order in putting future selection of administrative law judges more directly in the hands of political appointees, they say, will make it easier for the Trump White House to compel regulatory judges to follow its anti-regulatory policies and to fire them if they don't. This is a big, big break from previous law. Now, under the previous law, which dates back to 1946, administrative law judges were chosen based on their scores in elaborate examinations, meaning that, look, we want somebody who actually knows what they're talking about, knows what they're ruling on. And if you don't know what you're going to be ruling on, then you have no business being a judge. This executive order wipes that all away. Now they say, hey, are you friendly to oil and gas? Are you friendly to the banks? Are you friendly to corporations? Wonderful, great. Hey, old judge, you're fired. Get the hell out of here. We're going to put our guy in. And then our guy, you do exactly what we tell you to do, what my donors tell you to do, and then everything's going to be great. You'll have your job for a long time. And then we'll all prosper. Except for the people, the consumers, who are going to get screwed over. So, as you can see, this is hugely upsetting. Guess what? Guess what their new criteria is for these judges? The new executive order exempts administrative law judges from that old requirement, claiming, quote, sound policy reasons for doing so. What are those sound policy reasons? Are you going to tell us at all? No, you're not. There is no explanation. We have sound policy reasons for allowing our political appointees to choose their own political appointees, which, of course, could be political hacks. It's gross, man. Look, I wonder... okay, so there's a reason for this law, right? Anybody want to guess why back in 1946 the politicians decided, hey, you know what, this would be a bad idea to have political appointees be able to pick any political appointee that they want to fill those judgeships, regardless of their qualifications? Do you have any idea why? It's because of the corruption. Likely because of rampant corruption. I mean, look, agency heads who are political appointees, to then letting them do that, letting them appoint their own political appointees, how could that ever lead to corruption? Well, it is corruption. It's going to lead to massive corruption because that's the whole point. Trump works for his donors, says, hey, head of the HHS, appoint a judge that thinks that regulations on insurance companies are unconstitutional. And guess what? That's exactly what they're going to do. Or regulations on natural gas or on the banks. They're unconstitutional. That's what's going to happen. So we put our political hacks in, and then guess what? We can deregulate everything. And this is part of the lasting damage that Trump is going to do to our government, is already doing to our government. Forget it just for a second about the enormous damage that we have Neil Gorsuch and possibly Brett Kavanaugh that could have on the Supreme Court and on the country. You also have these lower courts that are incredibly important. So make no mistake, this is actually a gigantic power grab for the executive branch. Because again, who appoints the agency heads? Donald Trump. And now the agency heads can now appoint judges to rule on these regulations. It's a gigantic power grab and just another way to destroy corporations so that they can rob you. That's what this is all about. Okay, Jesus. So let me go here. Before we go to another segment here. All right. moving on. So President Trump has scored yet another blow against the ACA. Now, this time, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services on Tuesday announced massive cuts to a certain portion of the ACA's funding. This funding, of course, has to go with outreach. Now, the cut, explains the Huffington Post, will affect navigators. Now, the navigators are nonprofit organizations that federal government pays to help with enrollment in states that use healthcare.gov as their online marketplace for people trying to get insurance through the Affordable Care Act. Now, the cuts are around $27 million from last year. That's just how much they're cutting. Now, last year, they had cut their budget. They had cut their budget again last year, down to $37 million for 2018, and that is actually cut down from $63 million in 2017. So now they have about $10 million left in their budget in order to do basically their job. Now, the Trump administration has also made similarly sharp reductions in funds earmarked for advertising and promoting health insurance enrollment. Now, what's the impact? Well, it has been devastating. Last year's cut forced navigators to lay off certain staff members, cancel events, and in some cases, completely cease operations. They have closed up shop. So, more of these massive cuts. Now, of course, CMS, the head of CMS says, oh, no, it's not a problem. Here's the thing. We're just cutting it so that we can streamline operations. No, you're cutting it so that people won't know about it and that people actually won't get helped in order to get insurance from the marketplace, so they give up on the marketplace and go buy private insurance plans off the marketplace. Those private insurance plans don't get federal subsidies. Federal subsidies, of course, saves the Trump administration money, to which then they can shower on their wealthy donors. That's what's going on here. Now, the new cut will leave navigators with just a fraction of the money they had available for the open enrollment periods that occurred during President Barack Obama's administration, in all likelihood hampering their ability to help consumers through the complicated process of choosing a health insurance policy and applying for financial assistance. Again, that's what they want to avoid. Ooh, we don't want to help people. We don't want to help people pay for their insurance. No. You guys can rot. We don't care at all. That costs us money. Now, look, I've had a lot of criticisms of the ACA, and I'm going to get into more in a few minutes, but one of the good things about it is that it was actually a really good progressive taxation system. So they raised taxes on the richest people, and they distributed it through subsidies to people who are middle class and poor to try to get health insurance. Now, the savings for the new cut, and they, of course, claim that, hey, we're just doing this so we can save money, right? It actually accounts for less than 0.5% of what the federal government is expected to spend to subsidize private coverage and Medicaid next year. No, we're trying to save all this money, except that we're really not spending all that money, much money on navigators to help people get private insurance. No, we're doing it to make the ACA incredibly difficult, time-consuming, and hard in order to make it so that people don't use it. We don't want people to use healthcare.gov, so then we can get rid of it. And we can finally fulfill the promise of getting rid of Obamacare. Now, that's not the only change CMS has announced as well. Going forward, it will also encourage navigators to educate consumers about skimpier alternatives to traditional insurance, including short-term, limited duration plans that frequently leave out basic benefits, such as prescription drugs, and are unavailable to people with pre-existing conditions. So here comes non-insurance insurance junk plans. But what's the point of having insurance that doesn't actually do anything? Oh, right, it helps insurance companies. Because when these companies sell these plans as being cheap, people don't look into the fine print, and they think, oh, what's the problem? I got insurance. I'll be fine. But I only pay like $50 a month. I mean, it's skimpy and somewhat, but it must cover something. And then they find out, whether through an accident or they get sick, that it covers absolutely nothing. And that it's basically worthless. It's worthless junk insurance. And now these navigators are being required to tell people about junk insurance plans. Are you winning yet? Do you feel like you're winning yet? CMS also is expected to publish a regulation that would permit consumers to carry these junk insurance plans for longer than a couple of months, up to a full year. So look, these terrible insurance plans, right? These junk insurance plans are, you can only have them for about 3 months. So they're very short term. Now you can carry these junk insurance plans for even longer. Now that means the plans will be competing for business more directly with the more comprehensive insurance listed on the exchanges. And look, even the comprehensive plans have a lot of problems. High deductibles, high copays, and high premiums. Nonetheless, these insurance plans are actually worse than that. Disaster. Now, Lori Lodes, former CMS official from the Obama administration and founder of the organization Get Covered America, said, quote, requiring navigators to sell junk plans is the same as requiring doctors to offer snake oil. The whole notion is outrageous. And again, only helps insurance companies. We are slowly going back what little tiny amount of progress we had in the ACA. But that, of course, is a point. Republicans don't want people to be able to be helped by government in order to buy insurance. Basically, their plan is, hey, if you can afford insurance, pay an exorbitant amount. If you can't afford insurance, die. And die quickly. Or don't get sick. Now, look, the ACA, as I just mentioned, a little bit of progress, but it is based on a failed concept, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention that. It has helped people get health insurance. Some people get health insurance, and it has helped them get health care. And in fact, the thing that the ACA got the most right was expanding Medicaid. And look, they should have expanded it more. In fact, look, me, I would have went for a Medicare for all system. But look, what they did right in Medicaid, they also kind of fucked up as well because it didn't go as far as planned. And we had a court decision, thanks to the Supreme Court. We weren't able to expand Medicaid to all states. It had to be optional. But anyway, this is clearly a war on consumers, right? And that's what all these different decisions in the sabotage of the ACA is all about. And since they failed to repeal it and replace it with something even more right-wing, that's why we're seeing this sabotage. Now, what's the effect of that sabotage? Well, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services issued a report demonstrating the effects and the higher premiums it has created. Just last week, there's been lower enrollment, especially among those who earn too much to qualify for subsidies, which, look, is a lot of people in that hole. Now, in addition to the cuts in enrollment assistance and advertising for the sign-up periods, President Trump has also cut two important funding streams for health insurance companies. Now, if you do that, you're going to end up with these insurance companies going, okay, here's what I'm going to do. If you stop giving me money, then I'm just going to raise premiums on everybody to make up for it because we've got to make a profit. Well, that is one of the biggest faults with our healthcare system is that you've turned it into a for-profit venture, which it should not be. Now, the previous decision cut off billions in payments owed to insurers, resulted in significant premium increases for the year, and the latest one could do the same. Congress this year also repealed the tax penalties associated with the individual mandate that most people obtain health coverage, effectively ending the mandate and removing a key incentive for less expensive healthy consumers to pay into the insurance system. What that does is that ends up creating what we call a death spiral in insurance companies. So what you have is, look, when you have healthy people that no longer have to pay a penalty, they end up leaving. They're like, fuck that. I don't need health insurance. I don't have to pay a penalty. I don't need health insurance. I'm going to get out of the system. I'm going to save my money. But that leaves people who are sick, who need insurance, who have pre-existing conditions. That leaves them to absorb the higher costs. Pretty much all you have left in that system after a while is just basically sick people who are paying extremely high costs to be able to pay for the insurance with giantly high deductibles. And basically, it gets to a point of where it just falls apart. And that's what's going on. So, and that's exactly what the Trump administration was hoping for, because they want to tank the ACA. Now, that strategy, I do think, will backfire, and here's why. According to the HuffPost YouGov poll conducted back in May, a majority of Americans said healthcare was a top issue when it comes to the midterm elections. Well, 30% of voters picked healthcare. That's the most important, compared to 25% who each said guns and immigration, as well as 24% who said the economy. So, healthcare, the most important issue in the midterm elections. So I actually have something that the Democrats should do. I think the Democrats should run on Medicare for all. Now, we've seen Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez run on strong, bold, progressive platform and actually win. She beat an entrenched incumbent, and of course, she's expected to easily win her general election, which means she should go into the House. So the lesson there is that, oh no, the Bronx is really weird and too white and progressive. It'll never work in the Midwest. But it will work in the Midwest. Tammy Duckworth is absolutely wrong when she says progressive ideas will not win in the Midwest. They absolutely will, because it turns out people in the Midwest also like healthcare. They don't want to deal with insurance companies. Nobody wants to deal with an insurance company. In fact, everybody knows that the insurance companies work against you. Their whole profit motive or I should say, their whole profit model is based on denying as many claims and charging as much for premiums as legally allowed and as the market will bear. They do that because so they can line their pockets. People do not like dealing with them. So if you're to run on Medicare for all, which is an excellent system, which would save $17 trillion per year, according to some studies, compared to our current system, it saves money. It covers everybody. The expanded version from Bernie Sanders, of course, covers things like dental and vision and things that regular Medicare right now does not cover, and does so cheaper and does so better. It's time to move for Medicare for all. So Democrats, pay attention. It's polling at over 60%. Bold progressive visions win elections. Because as the ACA will continue to fall apart due to Trump's sabotage, you're going to need to have a better plan ready to make healthcare affordable. And that plan is Medicare for all. It's already there. It's already been introduced. People are already talking about it. There's already positive polling about it. Just come out and say it and mean it. I'm in there for Medicare for all. Let's go for Medicare for all. You elect us. That's exactly what we're going to do. And I can almost guarantee that that is going to be a winning issue. Okay. Speaking of bold progressives, you know what? I'm going to take a quick break here, actually. So I'm going to come back after this. We've got Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. We have another healthcare story that's disastrous. We'll talk about this Anti-Antifa Act that's been introduced into Congress. And then, of course, Joe Rogan. So stay right here. We'll be back in a few minutes. Remember to like and share. And if you have a super chat, please use that because that helps the show. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Stay right here. Welcome back to the show. Run the Nation right here, TWT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. Okay. That's a good break. Coffee break. So what we're going to do, we're going to move on to more disaster. This time against Antifa. Okay. So now Republicans are very, very concerned about the Antifa movement. Antifa, of course, stands for anti-fascist. And they fight against, well, fascists. I mean, obviously, what makes them different from a lot of the resistance groups is that they're not afraid to punch a Nazi. Now, let's be clear. I am personally a nonviolent person. I believe that we can do it without violence. But that's just my personal belief. That said, the Republicans are and conservatives are going hard against Antifa, and they're doing so via legislation that is disastrous. Now, Representatives Dan Donovan and Peter King of New York are among 4 Republicans sponsoring legislation that would punish any mask-wearing counter-protester who says injures, well, that's obvious, oppresses, threatens, or intimidates a demonstrator with up to 15 years in prison. Now, look, injures, okay, I'm still sort of uncomfortable for that because fights happen during protests and things like that. Giving them an automatic 15 years in prison seems a bit excessive. Now, this bill was introduced by Representative Dan Donovan, a former prosecutor best known for helping Eric Garner's killers stay out of prison. So, lovely person, right? Now, it's also co-sponsored by fellow New York Republican Representative Peter King. Peter King, of course, is an avowed white nationalist and very, very racist person. Representative Paul Gosar, who is also a conspiracy theorist. So he believes that George Soros might have orchestrated the violence in Charlottesville through a false flag operation. Wonderful. And Representative Ted Budd, who, of course, is a favorite of the Club for Growth. Now, the legislation introduced by all 4 of these Republicans, these wonderful people, would punish anybody who injures, oppresses, threatens, or intimidates any person engaged in a legally protected right or privilege while wearing a mask with up to 15 years in prison. Now, again, one of the problems here is how vague this is. If you oppress or intimidate someone, well, that's really subjective. Oh, no, I'm being intimidated because somebody is saying bad things about me. He just happens to be wearing a scary mask. Really? That person would get 15 years in prison. That is disastrous. Wear a mask to a protest. Whether it be a Guy Fawkes mask for people, for example, who are doing Occupy. Prison. Go to prison. You're wearing a mask. We can't see you. And then, of course, there are things that can be interpreted as masks. Like maybe a scarf if it's cold. That mask. You're intimidating me and you're wearing a mask. No, I'm wearing a fucking scarf, you idiot. It's cold outside. That's the kind of stuff that it could very, very likely happen if this legislation were adopted. So that vagueness is incredibly disastrous. But nonetheless, there's going to be a lot of people that are like, yeah, but Jeff, you don't understand. Antifa is the worst. They're terrible. They're so incredibly violent. And they hurt so many people. They kill people. Really, how many people has Antifa killed? In the more 30 years of Antifa activity, there has been one confirmed fatality caused by an Antifa group member. Back in 1993, when a Nazi in Portland, Oregon, was shot during a fight at a gas station. Antifa has killed one person in a 30-year history. So let's compare that, right? For comparison's sake. Now, that one person, that's terrible. Don't shoot people. That's terrible. But let's compare this to white supremacists, right? Sovereign citizens, neo-Nazis, the Klan, all the members of these far right-wing groups. Far-right extremists were responsible for 670 fatalities, 3,053 injuries, and 4,420 attacks in the United States from 1990 to 2012. according to a report from the Combating Terrorism Center at West Point. So in the 30 years of Antifa, one person was killed who was a Nazi. And in just, 22 years? A 22-year period? 670 people were killed by extreme right-wingers. I wonder who are the violent ones. I can't tell who are the most violent. Antifa or right-wing terrorists. Can't tell. So, why is the government going after Antifa? I think it's pretty clear. It's because the government are the fascists in this case. You have Donald Trump, Jeff Sessions, Stephen Miller, on and on in the government. People in running police stations. You have people in the military that are part of this far-right white supremacist movement. Again, you have members of Congress, sitting members of Congress like Peter King, who is a well-known white supremacist, retweeting out, other far-right leaders in, for example, I believe it was the Netherlands, and saying, we can't repopulate our country with other people's babies. Yeah, Peter King, definite racist. And look, do you know why this happens? Ironically, it's because we're too civil. And we're having this conversation about civility with people who are neo-Nazis. No, you have to be civil to the neo-Nazi. We just got to hear him out. No, I'm not going to hear out somebody who thinks the Jews are running the world and then they're terrible, and that, blacks are inferior and we should create a gigantic white ethno-state by kicking out all the immigrants and kicking out anybody who isn't a white right-winger. I don't want to hear that stuff. I'm not going to sit there and compromise with that. Now, if you think I think that, rich people can pay less taxes, but I'm against corruption, well, then I can work with you. I don't agree with you on pretty much anything else, but if you're against corruption and you're still, consider yourself a conservative, etc., okay, that's fine. We have differences on a lot of issues, but I can work with you on corruption and things like that. But if you have any of those beliefs, any white supremacist beliefs, then you can go and fuck right off. I don't care. I'm not interested in working with you. I'm not interested in being civil to you. And I won't cry when somebody punches you. Again, don't advocate violence here. I'm just saying that I wouldn't be upset. But look, again, the civility argument, right? Civility emboldens them, okay? And look, there are some in the center that even help them. Let me give you an example here. Peter King is backed by Michael Bloomberg. Michael Bloomberg, who's like, I might consider running for president, and I'm going to sprinkle a whole bunch of money to get other centrists into office. He held a fundraiser at his house for this racist Peter King. This is the so-called independent centrist, Michael Bloomberg. No. Not at all. This should disqualify Michael Bloomberg from doing anything. If that's a centrist, I want no part of that. And I don't think most of you do. And that's the problem with centrists. That's the problem with civility. Because, look, it was the centrists. It's always the centrists. The people are like, no. If we just appease them, if we just work with them, then, everything will be okay. And don't listen to the leftists. No, we're gonna play nice with the center right. Because we need to get votes. Because we need to get popular support. No. You know why? Because that's how fascism begins. And if it's a battle between fascists and anti-fascists, well, I think it's obvious what side I'm going to be on. Okay. I think I'm clear. Moving on. Okay, here we go. All right. Now, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a strong progressive, and she won on an unapologetically strong progressive platform. That includes things like abolishing ICE, Medicare for all, free college, $15 minimum wage, and many, many more other things, right? So now she's basically going to Congress. She defeated Joe Crowley, number 4 Democrat in the House, in a contentious primary, where she came up out of nowhere to knock this guy off. It's fantastic. An amazing, amazing victory. And she is very much expected to win her general election and cruise into the House. So what do Democrats in the House think about this? Well, there's actually a bit of a mixed reaction here. Now, for one, according to one Democratic source, the entire spectrum of House Democrats, party leadership, campaign leadership, are all trying to assess what she wants to do and how she is ready to play ball, or how ready she is to play ball. Huh. Well, look, if you're dealing with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I'm pretty sure that one of her plans is not playing ball. Nonetheless, of course, since we're dealing with politicians, a lot of them are thinking, how does her coming to Washington change my plan or help my plan? Of course. Now, according to this article, Democrats are largely thrilled to welcome the telegenic rising star to their ranks, although she is already ruffling some feathers. Now, how is she doing that? Well, she's doing that by being strong and progressive. Now, there's nothing that establishment Democrats hate more than somebody who is unapologetic in their beliefs, which explains the problems some of them are having with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Now, some of them are saying, now, wait a minute, this seems to be effective. Maybe I'll jump in. So we'll get to that. Now, the article mentions that Ocasio-Cortez will plan to hit the campaign trail for at least 3 other Democratic candidates in primary races this year who are backed by Justice Democrats, a pact that supports progressives. That includes Missouri congressional candidate Cori Bush, former teacher, registered nurse, and pastor who is vying to unseat longtime Democratic Representative Lacey Clay. Now, on that, there are some Democrats in the House that are like, "Ooh, no, don't go after, don't primary these Democrats. No, we can't do that." In fact, Gregory Meeks, Democrat from New York, said, quote, "We're trying to take back the House, but it seems like they're just trying to go after Democrats. It makes no sense. I would hope that the new member coming in would keep the eye on the prize." Well, what is the prize? Well, the prize is winning against a Republican. Now, before Ocasio-Cortez's district is massively Democratic. That's why she's expected to breeze through her general election without a problem. So, but these centrist Democrats, well, they make the argument that, well, look, in these other places, New York, they're too white, they're too weird. Somebody like her would never win in the Midwest. They don't have a fair chance in hell of winning an election. No, you've got to go to the right and appeal to conservatives or people in the center. We'll have to see if that is effective in the Midwest. I don't think so. But here's the thing, right? Gregory, genius. The whole point is to to take back the House, right? And in order to take back the House, you need to have strong candidates. If you have a strong candidate, you're more likely to win elections. How do you get a strong candidate? You do it by running primaries, which primaries happen to have Democrats versus Democrats. The whole reason that it says, oh, they're just going after Democrats is because we're running primaries. Once the primaries are over, then you go after the Republicans and you crush them. That's the whole point. That's the whole point of primaries. Okay, anyway. Representative Tim Ryan who has also warned that the Democrats focused on identity politics risk alienating blue-collar working-class voters in the heartland, like his, said Ocasio-Cortez's victory is no indication that the party on the whole is shifting to the left. Now, before I get to his quote here, I want to mention that. Identity politics. They're alienating blue-collar working-class voters. Who do you think those blue-collar working-class voters are? Yes, there are white people. White people are blue-collar. But guess what? There are also black people and Latinos who are working-class blue-collar workers in the heartland. It's not just white people. So that goes back to the myth of the white working class. The working class is everybody who works for a living that is below a certain amount of income per year, that work in the jobs like factories. It's not just white people that do those jobs. It's a lot of other people as well. So that whole thing, you're going to offend the white working class. Not true. But anyway, now he said, quote, "We saw Connor Lamb win too. So my big pitch is that you've got to let people run in their district and let them determine what the issues are and what the priorities are in that congressional district. That's the essence of being a member of Congress, and so everybody's got to make their own judgment on that." Hey, look, we had this centrist Democrat win. So look, it happened to be in the Midwest. So Pennsylvania, he won a special election. Well, that's because the other guy was a monster. In fact, let me go to another one, Doug Jones. Doug Jones won in Alabama, but he was running against a pedophile. What does it say about your party that you barely win against people that are monsters and pedophiles? I'm just saying. Whereas Ocasio-Cortez won her primary by double digits. She crushed in the primary, and she's going to crush in the general. But anyway, look, here's the thing. The reason why she won is not because it was, weird or white or the Bronx was especially progressive, right? She actually got the turnout. And the reason that she got turnout is that she ran on issues that were incredibly important. Now, those issues, Medicare for all polls at 60%, living wage, free college, protecting seniors, all poll massively well with the American people. And look, she even brought abolishing ICE into the mainstream. That was something that was actually a very risky political move, but now has been embraced. Like, you know what? You're right. We should abolish ICE because all they do is basically separate families at the border at this point. They're the brown shirts of the Trump administration. We already have Border Patrol. Why do we need ICE? We don't. That's the answer to that. Now, basically the point is if you're a politician and you want to win, you actually run on popular issues. Now, there are people out there, more naysayers. For example, Nancy Pelosi, Dianne Feinstein, they say that socialism is not ascendant in the party. Again, I mentioned Tammy Duckworth, right? She said that socialism won't win in the Midwest. Well, Ocasio-Cortez's version of democratic socialism actually does win in the Midwest. Traditionally, those were some of the most heaviest union districts. Those are the places that actually brought you things like the weekend and higher minimum and the minimum wage and other places and other policies. That happened in these places. So, excuse me if I say that Tammy Duckworth is dead wrong when she thinks the Midwest, states that voted overwhelmingly for Bernie Sanders, for example, during the primary, Michigan was a huge, huge upset. There is a market here for those ideas. There are people that want them. So we just have to have politicians that run on them. And by the way, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is also campaigning on behalf of Abdul al-Sayed. Now, he is running for the governor of my home state of Michigan. So he's running. He's an excellent progressive. I've spoke to him personally. I've talked to him before. I've listened to him speak. He is a true progressive and a champion, and would be a champion for the people. here in Michigan. So she is, there's another progressive or so-called progressive running in the race as well. And your normal establishment figure. And of course, Ocasio-Cortez, she knows who the real progressives are. And so that's why she's campaigning on behalf of El Said. So anyway, that's some of the naysayers, right? But she's actually got some allies in the House as well. For example, Jerry Connolly. Now, he predicted that Democrats will welcome Ocasio-Cortez. He noted that her surprise win is likely to earn her major respect inside the conference. Quote, "You can like and appreciate Joe," meaning Crowley, "and wish him well and hope he'll succeed without necessarily resenting somebody who successfully challenged him and clearly represents the face of the district. I think that will command respect in the caucus." Imagine that. A politician that doesn't take corporate money, that runs in these bold progressive issues, getting respect in the House. That's amazing. Now, Connolly, I'm sorry, that's the wrong thing. Let's see. There was another politician, a Democrat, Connolly, who warned that being a freshman, however, in a body of 435 lawmakers is a humbling experience. So there's a little bit of contempt here from this from Connolly. He said, "One that will both require some time for Ocasio-Cortez to gain her footing and have a tempering effect on her sway over the direction of the party. Once she is elected, but once you join the freshman class, you've got to deal with the reality of adjusting to the institution, getting oriented, learning how things are done, or how you can be successful and forging alliances, not with just people who share your ideological perspective, but others as well." So, look, that quote here is actually from somebody who's like, well, we welcome her and everything, but she's gonna have to learn how it really works. So even when they try to compliment her, they're also being sort of condescending, which is interesting. Look, she'll have to learn how it really works. No, she's actually coming to change how it works, Mr. Connolly. And look, she may only be a freshman. That's not going to shut her up. In fact, that's probably going to make her louder. Now, here's another Democrat, Peter Welch. He said that Democrats should take a lesson from Crowley. "If we're smart, we'll welcome her with open arms." Lawmakers, aware of the clout that she may yield, have already yet been reaching out to ask which caucuses she wants to join. It's back to the article. Whether she has leadership ambitions and what some of her broad ideas and goals might be, according to a Democratic source. Some members are even jockeying for an opportunity to work with the rising star as she contemplates her path in Congress. Now, Ro Khanna is another Justice Democrat. He was helped out by Crowley. Crowley helped him get elected. So he was like, look, man, I want to endorse Crowley. And then he got a lot of blowback from progressives. So it's like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to endorse both of them, which is basically a non-endorsement. So nonetheless, he's saying, look, members of Congress aren't fighting over her, but they're very, very excited about the prospect of her joining a caucus and want the opportunity to work with her. And he also mentioned that I've already had many of my colleagues asking to reach out to her. So here you have leadership, right? So there's difference between the leadership and the rank and file. So rank and file Democrats, they're actually like, well, hey, look, she's obviously doing really well for herself. She's one of the most well-known members of the House. She's got a huge social media following. She's been on Colbert. She's been all over the media circuit. She has more clout than, I think, almost any member of the House, especially for a freshman House member. So they're like, hey, you know what we can do? We're going to ride those coattails, and we're going to ride them hard. I'm excited to work with her. I'm excited to see where she's going to go. I hope she joins my caucus and all that stuff, right? So that's some Democrats. And then you have Democratic leadership and some of the centrist old guard that are like, oh, she needs to learn her place. That's what she needs to do. Don't worry, it'll take her time to acclimate and to see how stuff's really done. And she's a freshman, so freshmen, they should shut their mouths. That's sort of the difference that what they have. But this division does kind of show you how much the Democrats have been rattled to their core with the loss of Crowley. And of course, some are actually looking at maybe now, since they're emboldened, to be a bit more progressive. It's not a bad thing, that's actually a good thing. You know why? It's because, look, it shows how our message is starting to win. We are starting to win. So as long as we keep running bold progressives, I think there's a good chance we'll keep winning. And I think this win, at the end of the day, is going to give her it's going to give progressives huge momentum and might be considered a tipping point for the movement. I'm not entirely sure, but I certainly hope so. So, and of course, the establishment doesn't. All right. A couple more stories here for you guys. I'm running late today, but that doesn't matter. Let's move on. A Texas couple is taking drastic measures in order to pay for the health costs of their disabled daughter. One of those measures is getting a divorce. Well, now wait a minute here. Here's the thing. This is Jake and Maria Gray, and they're happily married. They've got 2 children, and one of them has a debilitating disability, and they plan on getting a divorce because they say it's the only way that they can afford health care for their daughter. Now, the couple's been married for about 9 years. They've got 2 kids, 2-year-old Theron and 6-year-old Brighton. Now, Brighton was born with a rare genetic disorder called Wolff-Hirschhorn syndrome. Now, that syndrome basically stops development at the newborn stage. So she may be in a 6-year-old body, but she has the brain of a newborn, and so requires round-the-clock care. Now, Maria Gray, her mother, said, quote, she will not be able to be on her own ever and requires 24/7 care. So, look, from what I know, anybody who's been in a situation where a family member needs round-the-clock care knows that it is very time-consuming and also incredibly expensive. Now, how expensive is it? Incredibly expensive. I'll get to one of the numbers of how much they spend per year on care. Now, the couple has tried to get Medicaid in order to deal with those spiraling medical costs. However, unfortunately, they make too much. Their husband, Jake, earns too much to get on Medicaid, $40,000 a year. Now, $40,000, in the grand scheme of things, it's actually not a whole lot of money, especially compared to gigantic medical bills. Now, before you say, why don't they just get insurance and stop trying to sponge off the government? I mean, Medicaid, you make too much for Medicaid. Why don't you just get insurance then? Well, they have insurance. See, Gray is an Army veteran, and he says the family has private health insurance, but they still spend $15,000 a year out of pocket. That's in addition to their copays. That's in addition to premiums and any other costs. $15,000 a year. Out of $40,000, that doesn't leave much left. In fact, he said, it's drowning us to try to keep up with their medical expenses. We've done everything we can do to try to keep her afloat, and we're going to reach a point where we can't do it, and we won't have another option. We don't know what to do. Now, the Grays have also applied for state assistance, but because of the giant waiting lists, they don't expect to get anywhere soon. Maria said, quote, we're number 60,000 in line. And of course, it being Texas after all, it might take quite a few years to get through that log. So this leads them, of course, to contemplate getting a divorce. Now, look, you might be wondering, how does that help? How does getting a divorce help her get Medicaid? Well, it would allow Maria to become a single unemployed mother and would qualify her for Medicaid. Now, the couple said that it might be the only way the family could get the help that they need to care for Brighton. So this is sad. I mean, just look at the lengths that people have to go just to get health care that they can actually afford. Now, Maria says, quote, you try anything when it comes to your child. So all of you, naysayers or people that balk at the idea of Medicaid or balk at the idea of some kind of socialist, healthcare system, right? Like Medicare for all or a national health service. Imagine if it was your kid. Imagine if you were in this situation, Army veteran, and a mother who can't work because she's got to care 24/7 for her child that will never be able to live on her own. Think of yourself in those circumstances. You got to ask yourself, what would I do to come, to care for my child? What would I do? And what, beyond that conversation, though, here's the thing, right? So a lot of people will see this story as, look at these dedicated parents. They're going to get a legal divorce just in order to do this so they can care for their child. Heartwarming. No, not heartwarming at all. What I see here is a failure of the system. Families shouldn't have to go through this in order to get health care. I mean, look, making health insurance a commodity, which is what we've done in this country, making healthcare a commodity, that only people who can afford it can be able to get it. And even if they get it, they have enormous bills that no person could possibly be able to afford. That is immoral. We all get sick. We all need healthcare. At some point, we're all going to need it. It shouldn't be based on whether or not you have enough money to be able to get things, to be able to get care. This is a deeply immoral system. And by the way, Maria said, quote, we're not looking for charity here. We're not looking for money or donations. We don't want to GoFundMe. We don't want any of that. What she says is, I need the state to step up and give us the benefits that we need. And of course, let me add, the benefits that you deserve. And not just you. I think everybody deserves those same benefits. I think we all deserve it simply for being alive. Healthcare is a human right. It should be a human right. That's why we need Medicare for all. We have to do it. We have to do it because it covers everyone. And besides, there's a lot of great reasons of why we should do it, other than the moral reasons. For one, according to certain studies, it could save $17 trillion over the next 10 years. We already spend a great deal of money on our healthcare system. If we replace it with Medicare for all, we will actually spend less than that healthcare system. That's why they come up with the numbers of $17 trillion over 10 years, because of the reductions in cost that we'll pay, because it will no longer be a for-profit system. Look, it's the fiscal thing to do, it's the moral thing to do, and it's actually also, thanks to the polling, with 60% of Americans supporting a Medicare for all single-payer system, the politically smart thing to do. Politics, cost, and morality, all on the same side. That does not normally happen. And that should say something about this system. We need Medicare for all so that situations like this, so that no family has to be torn apart just in order to be able to afford health care, can ever happen again. It should never happen, and that's why we need Medicare. Just expand it already. Okay. All right. Moving on, last story. So podcaster Joe Rogan has a message for people who are in favor of Donald Trump's zero-tolerance policy on family separation, and those who are, of course, have anti-immigrant stances. Take a look.
Either don't have kids or they don't think it could happen to their kids. Their idea is, hey, shouldn't have fucking come over here. You get those kind of people. Broke the law. Shouldn't have fucking come over here if your kid, you didn't want to get your kid separated. If you were in the presence of a woman who came over here from Guatemala, and she's poor and she's starving, and they're taking her baby away, and she's wailing and screaming from a primal place in her DNA that the one thing she loves more than anything is being taken away. A baby.
Yeah.
If that doesn't freak you the fuck out, you're not a part of the team, man. You're
Right.
missing it. You're missing it. What are we here for? We're here for 100 years of whatever. That's what we're here for. If you want to spend 100 years saying, "Hey, she should have fucking broke the law," I don't want you on the team. You're an asshole, right? And I don't give a fuck if you're right or left. I don't care if you're religious, or I don't care if you're an atheist. If that's what you support, you're an asshole, and we don't want you on our team.
I think it's pretty clear. Hey, if you're an asshole, we don't want you on your team. Gotcha. Now, Joe pretty much laid up an excellent moral argument here. So how can anybody see or hear that happen and not feel some sort of human emotion? That emotion being empathy. And look, that's the thing, though. The kind of people that Joe's talking about don't have empathy anymore. They're assholes, as Rogan puts it. They dehumanize these people so they don't have to feel that normal human reaction of empathy towards somebody who, look, came from another place, another country that has, violence and poverty and war and death. That person was fleeing those situations. That's why they came here. They didn't come here to ruin your life. They didn't come here to steal your job. They didn't come here to hurt you or murder you. They came this way to escape that. But of course, they try to dehumanize these people by saying exactly that. Oh, they're criminals, or they're rapists, or drug dealers. They're here to take your job. They're here to take your welfare, which is not true. In reality, the vast majority of undocumented immigrants are none of those things. And by the way, the people that he's talking about, the people that are having their families separated at the border, are actually here to apply for asylum. So they're not trying to sneak across the border. They go and present themselves to border agents and say, "We are here to apply for asylum. Please take us. Please arrest us. We are handing ourselves over to Border Patrol so that we can go and get asylum," because that's how you do it. You're supposed to present yourself at a point of entry. And that's exactly what they're doing. And even if you know all of that and you're still saying, "You shouldn't come here," well, then Joe's right. You're an asshole. Now, as far as Joe Rogan is concerned, I haven't really listened to Joe all that much, right? I had one sort of interaction with him, but not actually a real interaction. He accidentally tweeted out my Patreon, of all things. Now, of course, he meant to criticize the Pepsi ad with Kylie Jenner, and somehow my tweet ended up in there. Weird. But okay. I've also come across some videos where he talked about, where he talked with Kyle Kalinske from Secular Talk. Now, that's somebody that I consider a friend. Now, Kyle was on TYT Community way back in the day. So he's starting to talk to some left-wingers, but overwhelmingly, he tends to talk to right-wing people. And I think that does need to change. Now, for example, he's recently talked to Dave Rubin. And I saw a lot of segments on that as well. Now, when he had a discussion with Dave Rubin, it was actually fantastic because here's Rubin saying, "Oh, you know what? I don't believe in regulation at all. I believe companies should be able to self-regulate." Now, Rubin's got a whole lot of Coke money, so it makes sense why he shifted his position from "we should have smart regulation" to "companies should be able to regulate themselves." Joe, who considers himself an independent or a libertarian-leaning person, says, "No, that's stupid. You want to let coal companies, pollute the river? You want to let these companies dirty the air? And you think they're going to regulate themselves? No, we actually need some ground rules here." And while there is such a thing as over-regulation, regulation that is meant to hurt business, the vast majority of these regulations are actually there to protect people from corporate interests. You think these corporate interests are going to care if they pollute a river? No, because they made an extra $1. It's not their river. Their kids aren't swimming in it. They're not playing in it. They're not drinking the water from it. No, all they are is after is an extra $1. And so people like Joe Rogan are like, no, we actually do need some regulations. So I absolutely love that. But he's also a friend of Alex Jones, by the way. Now, look, what that tells me is, A, he talks to a lot of right-wingers, and B, he actually does have a bit of an open mind. Now, I think that's actually a good thing because you can have conversations with people you vastly disagree with. Now, I think Alex Jones is either a crazy person or he's doing an act. So, look, God forbid, right, that Alex Jones is just playing a character and he's actually like a super nice, sane, rational guy underneath it. And it's just like, yeah, I'm just doing this for money. Well, A, he's a terrible person, but hey, might be good enough for at least for Rogan to talk to and to consider a friend. I don't know. But the overall point, Alex Jones notwithstanding and Dave Rubin notwithstanding, if you can have discussions and talk to people on the other side of the aisle and come away with a different perspective and at least have a respectful argument with some on the right who are sane and rational, that's actually a good thing. And I actually like having an open dialogue, even if you disagree. That's why I always bring Sean on the show when we have these discussions, because I disagree with him on just about everything. But at least you can have some sort of semblance of rational discussion. But anyway, that brings me to the video here on some of Joe's possible beliefs. Well, let's take a look at that.
If you agree with certain economic policies that I don't agree with, and we could have a discussion about it, we could figure out why you agree, and we could figure out why people are allowing all of this money to get into politics. Why are we allowing all these special interest groups and lobbyists to interfere with our laws and influence our politicians and create all this shit that we don't want? Well, here's the number one reason. You can't just vote online. You can't just vote. It's not one person, one vote.
Right.
It's the Electoral College, and there's a lot of checks and balances that are in place. It's all wonderful and groovy, but it's not giving the trust to the people.
Right.
The trust to the people that they're informed, that they can make their own decisions, that more people should be able to make these decisions. But they're happening now. That 28-year-old girl who won in New York,
dude.
28-year-old
That's it.
Democratic socialist. Whether I agree with her or not, and I don't know if I do or don't. I bet I agree with her on a lot of things. I think education should be free. I think we should figure out a way. If we could pay for bombs, we could pay for schools. I think this idea that everybody should have health care, it's a great idea. Who the fuck wants people to not be healthy? Who wants people to be hurt and not be able to fix it? Are you really saying that struggling people should have to pay exorbitant amounts of money to get fixed when we could maybe chip in and help members of our team? That's stupid. Can't fill it out. Figure it out yourself. I had to. You got lucky, bitch. You got lucky you don't have leukemia. You didn't break both your legs when you were 18. Your parents are dead.
Right.
You got lucky, you piece of shit. These are people on our team.
Right.
Because I'm not talking about people who are lazy, good for nothing, losers, mooching off the system. You're going to have that too. Well, we got to figure out how to educate people so that happens less and less.
All right, so again, Joe, I pretty much agree with him on a lot of that stuff, especially about the money in politics, man. Yes, you've got all this money in politics, and you've got all these politicians getting paid off by these companies, and those politicians will do whatever the companies tell them to. But there's a couple of things that I disagree with. For example, voting online. And I used to think that was a fantastic idea, right? And then I got schooled. So I spoke to at length to Brad Friedman. Brad Friedman runs a little thing called Brad Blog. Hey, giving you a plug there. On his show, he talks about electoral integrity. So he's a big booster of paper ballots. Why paper ballots? Why we got the internet? Why don't we just vote online? Well, it's because it's insecure. It's one of the most insecure things you can do. If you've ever run a poll online, you would probably notice that those results are not exactly as reliable as they could be. Why? It's because you have people spoofing accounts. You've got sock puppet accounts. You've got all that stuff. And if you allow voting online, it would probably be susceptible to the same problems. Also, you might actually have the issue of whether it be other countries hacking into and changing election results, or political parties hacking in and changing those electoral results. So you want to have something that is accountable, that you can go and you can track the paper trail and you can make sure that those results are actually what they are supposed to be. that it actually represents the will of the people and not just the will of spam bots. So I get that. So look, on a lot of that stuff, Joe considers himself, and I'm this is from what I've heard of him and what I've seen, considers himself like libertarianish, right? But on things like regulation, healthcare, education, you heard him. Hey, we should all have healthcare. We should all have education. Well, those are progressive viewpoints. And as I said before, it seems like he is very open-minded to different viewpoints, and I think that is an excellent thing. Those are the types of people you can actually have a good conversation with, even if you don't agree. And of course, as he mentioned, look, I don't know if I agree with everything that Ocasio-Cortez and people on the left talk about, but I'm open to hearing it. I'm open to hearing it as long as you are basically good, just a good person and are not an asshole. So, look, that's a good thing. I'm open to dialogue. I'm glad that he's open to dialogue. And the good thing about that is that maybe if there is this open dialogue, that somebody will come away with a new perspective on something that maybe they never heard before. So I'm hoping Joe will continue to bring on more progressives and to have good conversations with. Kyle was a good start. I'm sure there were others that went on. I believe Jimmy Dore went on the show. So I think I hope that he balances out because he talks to a lot of right-wingers. I hope he can go and talk to some left-wingers as well. And so to get those ideas from all different sides. Because again, different viewpoints, it's not a bad thing. Okay. All right. That's it. Let me see here. There we go. Okay. So thank you guys for joining me. Thank you for going around the nation. If you haven't already, please give us a like and share. Also, please consider hitting the subscribe button and maybe becoming a patron. Patreon.com/TYTNation. That's how you can help out the show. You can help keep independent progressive media going, and you can keep the show growing as well. All right, everybody. Massively over time, but hopefully you enjoyed the show. We'll be back tomorrow. Another great show right here, 3 p.m. Eastern, TYT Nation. All right. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation. We'll see you all tomorrow.